The placid surface of Lake Serenity shimmered under the pale morning sun, an illusion of peace that belied the dark whispers clinging to its depths. For Elara, the lake was a scar etched onto her soul, a constant, shimmering reminder of a loss that had fractured her family years ago. She stood on the rocky shore, the cool breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, a faint, metallic tang that always made her stomach clench. Legends swirled around Lake Serenity, tales of ethereal lights dancing beneath the water, said to be the lost souls of those claimed by its cold embrace. These stories, once dismissed as local folklore, now felt like chilling premonitions, pulling Elara into a vortex of fear and morbid fascination. Her heart pounded a discordant rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of terror and an undeniable magnetic pull. She hated the lake, feared it with every fiber of her being, yet she found herself drawn back to its edge time and again. It was a torment she couldn't escape, a silent promise to a ghost. The memories of her childhood flickered like dying embers, particularly those of Lyra, her younger sister, whose laughter had once filled their small lakeside home. Lyra, with her bright, inquisitive eyes and an adventurous spirit that often led her to the water's edge. A specific memory, sharp and painful, surfaced. Lyra, a tiny figure in a bright yellow sundress, running towards the shimmering water, her voice a joyful cry swallowed by the wind. Then, the silence, the deafening, absolute silence that followed. Her father, a man once full of boisterous laughter, had become a shadow, consumed by a grief that manifested as an impenetrable silence. Their home, once vibrant, was now a mausoleum of unspoken words and shared sorrow. He rarely spoke of Lyra, and when Elara tried, his eyes would cloud over, a wall of pain descending between them. This unspoken barrier only fueled Elara's burning need for answers. A truth she felt was deliberately withheld. One afternoon, as Elara stared blankly at the lake, a weathered figure emerged from the dense foliage lining the shore. It was Silas, an old fisherman whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each one telling a silent story. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his gaze, surprisingly keen, fixed on Elara. He offered a gruff nod, then cast his line into the water with practiced ease. "Some things," Silas rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement, "are best left undisturbed, child, especially the peace of the lake." His words were a cryptic warning, stirring a fresh wave of unease within Elara, yet also igniting a spark of rebellious curiosity. He seemed to know more than he let on, his eyes holding a depth of knowledge that both intrigued and frightened her. As Silas continued his silent vigil, Elara's eyes fell upon something half buried in the damp sand near her feet. It was an old, faded photograph, its edges softened by time and moisture. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, brushing away the grains of sand. It was Lyra, her smile radiant, holding a small, intricately carved wooden bird. The sight of it sent a jolt through Elara, a fresh wave of obsession washing over her. This wasn't just a lake, it was a grave, a mystery, and Lyra's final resting place. That evening, as twilight bled into night, Elara returned to the shore. The air was heavy with anticipation. She watched, her breath catching in her throat, as a faint shimmering light pulsed beneath the water's surface, then another and another. They danced, ethereal and mesmerizing like tiny submerged stars. Terror and awe warred within her, a primal fear battling a strange, almost spiritual connection. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The lights pulsed again, brighter this time, and then, amidst the gentle lapping of the waves, Elara heard it. A faint, familiar melody, a lullaby her mother used to sing, echoing from the lake's dark, mysterious depths. It was Lyra's song. The haunting melody, a spectral echo of Lyra's lullaby, intensified Elara's resolve. No longer would she merely fear the lake. She would conquer its secrets, unravel the truth that had been shrouded in silence for far too long. This wasn't just about closure, it was about justice for Lyra, whose memory had been left to rot at the bottom of Lake Serenity. Her father, however, remained an imposing obstacle. Each time Elara broached the subject of Lyra's disappearance, a storm gathered in his eyes, his voice growing sharp, laced with an unfamiliar edge of hostility. He would dismiss her inquiries as morbid obsessions, urging her to let the past remain buried, a sentiment that only fueled Elara's suspicion. His attempts to dissuade her felt less like protection and more like a desperate effort to guard a dark secret. Undeterred, Elara began her own quiet investigation, a meticulous delving into the dusty archives of the local library. She pored over microfiche, sifting through brittle newspaper clippings and town records from decades past. The name Blackwood surfaced repeatedly, intertwined with her own family's history, not in tales of friendship, but in accounts of bitter land disputes and escalating business rivalries. Whispers of a long-standing feud, a deep-seated animosity that predated even her parents' generation, began to emerge from the faded print. The Blackwoods, prosperous and influential, had once been fierce competitors with her family's timber business, a rivalry that had reportedly turned vicious. One evening, unable to bear the weight of her discoveries alone, Elara confronted her father. The air in their quiet home crackled with unspoken tension. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "what exactly happened between our family and the Blackwoods, and what does it have to do with Lyra?" His face, usually a mask of stoic grief, contorted with a mixture of anger and panic. He slammed his fist onto the table, the unexpected sound echoing through the silent house. "It was an accident, Elara, a tragic, horrible accident. Leave it alone." But his vehemence only confirmed her fears. She pushed harder, demanding answers, forcing him to confront the truth he had so carefully buried. With a defeated sigh, his shoulders slumped and the dam finally broke. He confessed to a past business deal gone horribly wrong, a timber contract that had been sabotaged, costing his family everything. He blamed the Blackwoods, and their animosity had festered, growing into a silent, simmering hatred. He admitted that the day Lyra disappeared, he had been embroiled in a particularly nasty argument with old Mr. Blackwood, a confrontation that had left him seething. But as he spoke, Elara sensed a deeper evasion, a crucial piece of the puzzle still missing. His eyes darted away, his hands clenched, suggesting a lie of omission, a truth he was still too afraid to articulate about Lyra's final moments. Days later, Elara sought out Silas, finding him mending his nets by the lake. She recounted her father's partial confession, her voice laced with frustration. Silas listened patiently, his ancient eyes reflecting the lake's calm surface. "There's an old cave, child," he finally offered, his voice a low rumble. "Hidden away, just past the old willow at the northern cove. Children used to play there years ago. Lyra, she was a curious one." The revelation sent a jolt through Elara. A hidden cave. Why had her father never mentioned it? Driven by a renewed sense of urgency, Elara followed Silas's vague directions, pushing through overgrown brush until she stumbled upon a narrow, almost imperceptible opening in the rock face. The air inside was cool and damp, smelling of earth and ancient stone. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing crude drawings on the walls, childish scrawls depicting stick figures and animals. As she scanned the cave floor, her heart leaped into her throat. Lying half-buried under a thin layer of dust was a small hand-carved wooden bird. It was identical to the one in Lyra's photograph, the one Lyra had cherished. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, her thumb tracing its smooth, worn surface. But then she noticed it. A faint, dark mark, a rust-colored stain near its base. It wasn't mud. It looked like dried blood. This was no accident. This was something far more sinister. The ominous stain on Lyra's cherished wooden bird ignited a fire within Elara, transforming her quest from one of understanding into a relentless pursuit of culpability. The innocent facade of an accident had shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of a deliberate act, or at the very least, a consequence far darker than her family had allowed themselves to believe. Her gaze, once clouded by grief, sharpened with a fierce determination, focusing its intensity on the Blackwood family, the shadow that had always loomed over her own. If not her father, then who among them held the key to Lyra's final tragic moments? Her investigation led her inevitably to Marcus Blackwood, the son of the rival family. Their first encounter was fraught with a palpable tension, a silent acknowledgement of the generations of animosity that separated their names. He possessed a guarded intensity, his dark eyes mirroring a troubled depth that belied his family's reputation for ruthless ambition. Initially, Marcus was defensive, his words clipped and dismissive, yet Elara sensed a subtle intrigue beneath his hostile exterior, a flicker of curiosity that hinted at a shared burden. Their interactions became a delicate dance, each probing the other, gradually revealing a hidden history that bound them together more intimately than either would admit. Despite the deep-seated rivalry, Marcus displayed glimpses of a conscience, a subtle unease that suggested he too was grappling with unspoken truths. Elara, ever observant, noticed the way his gaze would drift to the lake, a distant melancholy clouding his features, a stark contrast to his family's usual dismissive attitude towards the tragedy. It was during one of her solitary searches through her mother's old belongings, a bittersweet journey through faded memories, that Elara stumbled upon a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages, brittle with age, contained her mother's elegant script, detailing not only the mundane anxieties of daily life, but also a growing apprehension about Lyra's fascination with the lake and, more unsettlingly, her secret meetings. The journal entries spoke of Lyra's innocent, yet clandestine, interactions with the boy from the other side, a phrase that sent a shiver down Elara's spine. Her mother had recorded her worries about Lyra's secretive nature and her unusual attachment to the forbidden friend, a Blackwood. The words were vague, never explicitly naming the individual, but the implication was clear. Lyra had been meeting someone from the rival family near Lake Serenity. Armed with this potent new revelation, Elara confronted Marcus once more, the journal clutched tightly in her hand. Her voice, though trembling, carried an unwavering conviction as she laid bare her mother's anxieties, forcing Marcus to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth of a past involvement. His initial denial quickly crumbled under the weight of Elara's evidence and the raw emotion in her voice. Marcus, his face etched with a complex mixture of guilt and resignation, finally revealed a partial truth. Lyra had indeed been with a Blackwood on the day she disappeared, but he insisted, with a desperate sincerity, that it hadn't been him. He spoke of a younger brother, more reckless, more prone to childish mischief, but offered no name, no further details, merely a veiled hint at another's culpability. His confession, though incomplete, was a significant breakthrough, shifting the focus of Elara's investigation onto a new, more elusive target within the Blackwood lineage. As Elara grappled with this new piece of the puzzle, Silas, the enigmatic old fisherman, once again appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. His eyes, ancient and knowing, met hers with a silent understanding. There was a flower, he mused, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. A rare bloom. Only grew in one patch by the northern shore, near the whispering reeds. Lyra, she loved those flowers. He described a delicate, almost iridescent blossom, its petals shimmering with an ethereal glow in the moonlight. It was a detail so specific, so seemingly insignificant, yet Elara knew, instinctively, that it held a deeper meaning. Later that week, while revisiting Marcus to press him for more information about his brother, Elara's eyes fell upon an old, dusty wooden box tucked away in a corner of his study. A surge of inexplicable curiosity compelled her to reach for it. Inside, nestled amongst forgotten trinkets and yellowed letters, lay a withered stem. Its delicate structure was barely recognizable, but the faint, almost ghostly sheen on its dried petals confirmed it. It was the rare flower Silas had described, not found by the lake, but hidden away in Marcus's possession. The discovery sent a jolt of ice through Elara's veins. Why would Marcus have this flower? And what did it truly signify about his knowledge, or perhaps his deeper involvement? The withered stem, a silent testament to a hidden truth, cemented an unspoken pact between Elara and Marcus. The initial tension between them began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile, yet potent alliance forged in the crucible of shared secrets and an urgent need for closure. Marcus, his carefully constructed defenses finally crumbling, confessed the full weight of his family's guilt, a burden that had festered for years beneath the surface of their strained interactions. He revealed the true extent of their involvement in the bitter rivalry with Elara's family, a feud so deeply ingrained it had overshadowed common decency and familial loyalty. With a heavy sigh, Marcus finally spoke his younger brother's name, Julian. It was Julian, he admitted, who had been with Lyra near the lake that fateful day. Julian, now a reclusive and troubled man, haunted by shadows only he could see, lived in self-imposed exile, consumed by the psychological scars of the incident. The accident, Marcus explained, was not a simple misstep, but a prank gone horribly wrong, a childish act of mischief orchestrated by Julian that spiraled into irreversible tragedy. The very lights underwater, the ethereal glow that had captivated and terrified Elara for so long, were not the whispers of lost souls, but a phenomenon related to a specific type of bioluminescent algae, known to thrive in the hidden cave and frequently disturbed by children playing. Julian, in a desperate attempt to scare Lyra, had agitated the algae, creating the shimmering spectacle that ultimately led to her fall. The revelation hit Elara with the force of a physical blow. The truth, raw and unvarnished, tore through the carefully constructed narratives of her childhood. Lyra's death, not an accident, but a consequence of a thoughtless act. The knowledge was almost unbearable, yet it brought a strange sense of clarity. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and fragmented, now began to interlock, forming a picture far more tragic than she had ever imagined. As if on cue, her father, a man previously encased in an impenetrable shell of grief and silence, finally broke. The dam of his unspoken pain burst, and he confessed his own agonizing complicity in the cover-up. His voice, hoarse with decades of suppressed anguish, trembled as he admitted to protecting Julian, not out of malice but out of a desperate, misguided attempt to shield both families from the devastating repercussions. He had feared the social ruin, the legal battles, the complete unraveling of their already fractured lives. He had chosen silence, a heavy, suffocating blanket that had inadvertently prolonged Elara's suffering and denied Lyra the justice she deserved. Elara listened, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, mingled with a profound sorrow for her father's tormented existence. The weight of his confession, the decades of silent suffering he had endured, was almost as heartbreaking as the truth about Lyra. She struggled with the magnitude of the deceit, not just from the Blackwoods, but from her own father, the one person she had believed would always protect her. The foundations of her childhood, built on a carefully curated version of the past, crumbled around her. Yet, amidst the wreckage of her illusions, a new resolve began to solidify. The truth, however painful, was finally within reach. There was only one remaining piece to confront, one final shadow to chase away. Elara knew, with an unwavering certainty, that she had to face Julian. It would be a painful encounter, fraught with the potential for further heartache, perhaps even danger, but it was a confrontation she could no longer avoid. The path to healing, to true understanding, lay through the heart of the darkness. She squared her shoulders, her gaze firm, knowing that the journey ahead would demand every ounce of her strength. The time for whispers and half-truths was over. The time for a direct confrontation with the source of her family's torment had arrived. Elara and Marcus, bound by the raw, unyielding truth of their family's intertwined tragedies, embarked on the somber journey to Julian's secluded cabin. The air was thick with unspoken tension, each mile bringing them closer to the architect of Lyra's untimely end. Nestled deep within the whispering pines, the small, weathered cabin appeared as reclusive as the man it harbored. A faint wisp of smoke curled from its chimney, a solitary sign of life in the otherwise desolate landscape. Elara's heart pounded, a drumbeat of anticipation and dread, as they approached the front door. Julian Blackwood, when he finally answered their insistent knock, was a shadow of the boy Marcus had described. His eyes, sunken and haunted, held a flickering paranoia that spoke of years spent wrestling with inner demons. He recoiled slightly at the sight of Marcus, then fixed a wary, almost feral gaze on Elara, his gaunt face betraying a flicker of recognition, a memory stirring from the depths of his tormented mind. He tried to deny them entry, his voice raspy with disuse, but Marcus, with a quiet authority born of shared blood and a desperate hope for his brother's redemption, pushed past him, ushering Elara inside the sparsely furnished, dimly lit space. The confrontation was immediate, a storm of accusations and denials. Julian, initially defiant, lashed out, his words a desperate scramble to preserve the crumbling facade of his sanity. He denied everything, his voice rising to a fever pitch, accusing them of persecution, of dredging up old ghosts. But Elara, her resolve unyielding, refused to be swayed. She spoke of Lyra, of the lost innocence, of the years of silence and suffering, her voice a steady, unwavering force against his frantic protestations. Marcus, standing silently beside her, his presence a heavy weight of familial expectation, finally broke Julian's resistance. He spoke not of blame, but of the crushing burden of guilt, of the freedom that confession could bring. Slowly, painfully, Julian began to unravel. The words, forced from him like jagged shards of glass, painted a horrifying picture of that fateful day. He recounted the prank, a childish, ill-conceived notion to scare Lyra with the shimmering lights of the bioluminescent algae in the hidden cave. He described Lyra's laughter turning to fear, her small hand slipping on the slick rock, the sickening thud, and then the terrifying silence. His voice cracked, choked with years of unshed tears, as he confessed to the panic that had seized him, the desperate, futile attempts to reach her, and finally, the overwhelming terror that had driven him to flee, leaving her submerged in the dark waters. The lights underwater, those ethereal beacons that had haunted Elara's dreams, were indeed the tragic consequence of Julian's misguided attempt to frighten Lyra. He explained how he had disturbed the algae, creating the dazzling, yet ultimately fatal, distraction. His confession was a torrent of raw pain and regret, revealing a lifetime of torment he had endured, a self-imposed prison of guilt. He had never truly escaped that cave, that moment, living every subsequent day in the shadow of his unforgivable act. Elara listened, a profound mix of anger, sorrow, and a strange, aching understanding washing over her. The anger was for the senselessness of it all, for the childhood stolen, for the years of deceit. The sorrow was for Lyra, for Julian's wasted life, for her father's tormented silence. But the understanding was for the fragile, flawed nature of humanity, for the way fear and youth could twist into tragedy. She saw the depth of her father's love, however misguided, in his attempt to protect Julian, to prevent further ruin. It was a flawed, desperate act, but born of a paternal instinct she now, paradoxically, began to comprehend. The truth, though a brutal laceration to her soul, began to offer a strange, unsettling path towards healing, a way to finally lay Lyra's ghost to rest. Then, with a trembling hand, Julian reached into his worn pocket. He pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket, its surface dulled by years of handling. "She had this," he whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes fixed on Elara with an unbearable sorrow. He pressed the locket into Elara's palm. Inside, nestled against the cold metal, was a tiny, hand-drawn picture, barely visible, but unmistakable. A crude, childlike portrait of Elara, smiling broadly, a testament to the enduring love of a younger sister. The tiny locket, warm from Julian's hand, felt impossibly heavy in Elara's palm. It was a tangible piece of Lyra, a silent scream across the chasm of time, and the sight of her own smiling face, drawn by her sister's innocent hand, shattered Elara's remaining defenses. Tears, long held back, streamed down her cheeks, not just for Lyra, but for all the lost years, the unspoken words, the truth that had been buried so deep. The raw honesty of Julian's confession, coupled with this poignant memento, stripped away the layers of anger, leaving behind a profound, aching understanding. Armed with the full, devastating truth, Elara returned home. She found her father sitting alone in the dim living room, the weight of his secrets visibly etched onto his face. This time, there was no accusation in Elara's voice, no bitterness in her gaze. Instead, a quiet strength permeated her words as she recounted Julian's confession, the details of Lyra's last moments, and the locket, a small silver bridge across the years. She spoke of the prank gone wrong, of Julian's panic, and of the lifelong torment he had endured. She spoke of her own anger, and then, slowly, of her dawning comprehension of his misguided attempt to protect everyone, an act born from a father's desperate love and fear. Her father listened, his head bowed, tears silently tracking paths down his weathered cheeks. When Elara finished, he lifted his gaze, his eyes red-rimmed but clear, devoid of the haunted look that had defined them for so long. He reached out, taking her hand, a gesture of connection that had been absent for decades. In that moment, a silent, profound understanding passed between them. The long process of healing and reconciliation had begun, not with a grand declaration, but with a shared tear, a gentle touch, and the quiet acceptance of a painful truth. The silent chasm between them, once so vast, began to narrow, filled by the fragile but potent bridge of forgiveness. In the days and weeks that followed, Elara and Marcus found a common ground that transcended their family's bitter past. The shared burden of their family's history, the raw vulnerability of their confessions, forged an unexpected bond between them. They spoke for hours, piecing together fragments of memories, finding solace in their shared understanding. Marcus, no longer weighed down by his own complicity, began to shed the guarded hostility that had defined him. He became a steadfast presence, a quiet support as Elara navigated the treacherous waters of grief and forgiveness. Julian, having finally unburdened himself of the truth, sought professional help. The journey of redemption was long and arduous, but he faced it with a newfound determination, the first flicker of hope in a life consumed by shadow. He understood that forgiveness, if it ever came, would be a gift he had to earn, not demand. Elara revisited Lake Serenity, not with the terror that had once gripped her, but with a quiet sense of peace. The shimmering lights beneath the surface no longer whispered of lost souls or impending doom. Instead, they became a poignant reminder of Lyra's vibrant spirit, a luminous memory that refused to be extinguished. The lake, once a symbol of her deepest fears, transformed into a sanctuary of remembrance, a place where Lyra's laughter could echo without the sting of tragedy. Elara found a way to honor Lyra's memory, establishing a small community project dedicated to water safety and environmental preservation around Lake Serenity. It was a living tribute, a way to ensure that no other child would suffer Lyra's fate, and a testament to the enduring power of her sister's brief, bright life. The strained relationships with the Blackwood family, though not entirely erased, began to mend, demonstrating the profound ripple effect of forgiveness. The town, once divided by old grudges, slowly started to heal, united by a shared understanding of past pains and a collective hope for the future. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elara stood by the shore of Lake Serenity, the locket, now polished and bright, resting against her chest. The sun, a warm golden embrace, danced on the water's surface, and the soft murmur of the wind carried whispers of forgotten melodies. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet, resolute peace. She had carried the lessons of the past, the weight of the truth, and the enduring love for her sister. But she was no longer defined by the shadows. Elara looked towards the horizon, her gaze steady, her spirit unburdened, ready to embrace a new dawn, a symbol of hope and profound healing.